So we always start with, a promotional video of our vision, because as you notice in image that you received, that the goal here is really to create the joint resilience and to unite us in order to turn the negative disruption into a positive clean tech disruption. Yes.
Forget the war.
Think about how it could be. A new mindset has arrived, where to share has become our greatest power.
It is this energy that guides us, will enlighten us, where meaning and purpose is a flame.
Burn inside every soul on the planet.
Welcome to the human-to-human model, uniting and inspiring leaders globally.
To build together with meaningfulness and joy.
Opening new possibilities for people.
Anticipating disruption. Rethinking society.
Who will reach their potential because the future is today.
Join us
To be a sustainable plus 100 world.
And I think right now is clearly the way to act. Lack of clean energy will affect the Earth's core later.
I find that when people begin making small changes, they gradually get bigger because they get this feeling, I am doing something.
So we moved from greed-based civilization to human value-based civilization. Making money is a happiness. Making other people happy is a super happiness.
Wondering about your future? So bring your DNA to us today.
So actually for us, it's really like a historical day, because with our roots, we are mainly from the solar industry. Yes, and only a few months ago, we started officially like a CleanTech business club. Even though we are also having a lot of friends from other industries, because solar companies also entered into the different businesses. Yes, but I believe that the next, let's say, change of the world's paradigm, the wave, will be combined by convergence of different disruptions. And I think that e-mobility will help us really to accelerate the clean tech growth. So I'm really, I would like to thank you for joining us. And we are looking forward to hearing from you. So first, how the e-mobility is touched with the COVID-19, and how do you manage businesses right now? And more importantly, how do you think that the business will continue after the COVID-19 era? Yes, and how we can operate with it. Alex, as a co-chair and lead moderator, I give you the floor. Yes, so please feel free. You are now the boss.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Thomas. So welcome everybody to this exciting panel. And I'm very excited for this discussion, because we see that everything that we have thought so far as the future of mobility suddenly comes with a big question mark. And when I'm sitting here in Paris, when I look out of the street, then I walk across the streets and there's just no car, and not only on Sundays. So dramatic changes have impacted us in the last weeks. And the question is then, to what extent these changes have impacted our societies, our rules, our legal system, will also impact our trend, our strong trend towards green and decarbonized mobility. And I think we have a great panel, and I will introduce you all in a second, and then give a short introduction, and then try to get as much of your points of view to make it a lively panel. So we have Vipul, CEO of First View Media, with us. We have Shivam, Managing Director of India Chin, with us. We have Duarte, Global Business Development Director of FASEC, and we have met us before on various regions of the world. We have Christian, CEO of Green Bag, very smart, intelligent transport solutions for bike paths, and you will give us more details. And Jacob, CEO of Bodawerk, who is doing great stuff in Africa, where we have exciting developments coming forward. And luckily, I had this morning the ambassador of Uganda on the phone, not yet so much affected like we in Northern Hemisphere on COVID. Now, before I give the word to all of you one by one, quickly my view of this one. I started up with this e-mobility when I was in the board of CLEPA in Brussels, and I discovered that the solutions making one rule for all over Europe and coordinated with US and coordinated with Japan and China is no longer a solution because there's no one size fits all. And mayors of large agglomerations, mayors of large cities like London or Paris or any C40 city in the world have discovered this in a while. Combustion engine transportation, burning oil is not a solution for our people in large cities and do consistently put us in a trouble, putting up health issues, and not only in Europe, also in Africa. In such a situation now, we have started a big track and a big move towards green mobility, halfway successful in China, relatively successful in Europe. It's just starting to kick in with a single digit, even upper single digit electric vehicle penetrations, and a clear trend, Green Deal by the new commission to cut back on our combustion engine futures, peak ICE. And even in the US, there was at least a fight between EPA and the California Air Resource Board about how quickly to engage. Yeah, and then we were all suffering what we hear today, COVID-19, and this has put many things to on hold. And suddenly survival, economic survival of our companies, of our startups, we will hear more of this one, but survival of all of us becomes much more important than it has been in the past. And of course, as you think about your own well-being and your own future of the next day and the next weeks and months, you start forgetting about the environment. So the big question I would like to discuss with you now from different angles of the world is, how can we first come through this crisis, manage through the situation, but also getting out of it, and how much will be left of our future of a decarbonized green mobility that drives our future, or might be a future where we don't need any mobility at all because we all stay social distancing. And when I just saw the promotion video, when you think about social distancing and you see the promotion video, then many of the things we just saw will no longer be permitted, at least for the next weeks, months, maybe years. So this was my opening remark, and now I would go through the list one by one. Just introduce yourself quickly and then put your viewpoints on it, and then we can start a lively discussion. And I would maybe start with Vipul first, because I have you already in front of me. So please go first, and then we go through one by one. If I miss one, please let me know, yeah, because I try to have all names here on the list, but I might overlook or mispronounce one of you, and I would apologize. Please correct me. So Vipul, please.
All right. Thank you, Axel, for the opening on this panel. So I think so I just first quickly introduce myself. I am the CEO of First View Media. We operate entire Asia region, where we have offer our complete media services to the mobility sector. So if you ask me, I think we've been as a company massively affected because we do a lot of conferences, publications, market outreach, which I think as of now we are seeing a major decline to our existing business. However, I think I have been very optimistic about it from the start. If you ask me, I think COVID-19, I would like to quote the Italian Prime Minister here, who said that it is going to be a part of our daily lives and we will have to adjust to live in these times, which means that we have to take it in a stride and not really think of it as a huge crisis which affects businesses in general. I think from what I know in India as well as Asia, government is pretty active. They are rolling out tenders, they are floating and procuring more of vehicles. They're also supplying to cross-border territories such as Nepal. Recently, I think we've placed order of about 500 e-vehicles to Nepal. So I think businesses as usual in territory, you would see a small short-term stall out, but definitely not a permanent blow as far as the business is concerned.
Thank you. So we move forward. Then I have next on my list here, Duarte is next on my list.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Duarte Ferreira. I am the Global Business Development Director for EFASEC, a Portuguese export company specialized in energy, in transport, mobility, and also environment. We do have and operate since the last 11 years hardware and software charging infrastructure production factory, and with global outreach. So we are in more than 70 countries today. And what I can say about the electric mobility market is that we will have a new normal post-COVID, but clearly the new normal will still incorporate the green factor, and especially the green factor within electric mobility. That means that, having said that, it will have different routes and different options on the mix by which electric mobility most likely will evolve and will accelerate or not accelerate. There will obviously be, let's say, a replanning of the investments that have been put in place because of the macro global perspectives and priorities by governments, regulatories, and the industrial actors in this field. But having said that, they will not pull back because they will keep doing this, given that the topic is even more urgent right now after COVID rather than it was before. However, I do believe that if you divide the electric mobility sector in terms of layers, and if you look into, for instance, the area of buses, so heavy vehicles, bus transportation systems, fleets for deliveries, etc., those areas will keep investing at the possible levels to electrify, because lots of these companies sometimes are public, semi-public, on bus side, and also on the fleet side, they will need to go electric because also the global public opinion will put some pressure on this to get the carbon footprint reduced. On the level of the EV adoption, so by the consumers like all of us, there will always be the countries that are in the forefront, so Benelux, Norway, the Nordics, Germany. They will keep doing that, obviously probably a bit with a slower pace. And then you have, let's say, the middle ground, countries like Portugal or the Latin world, Middle East, and also the US and Canada. They will also keep doing their adoptions, but it will be at a slower pace. For the countries like Asia or even Latin America, excluding China, I think that it will keep going, but at a much slower pace, and we are seeing that in investments that were planned for charging. Okay. However, the ecosystem will keep moving slower, but still with the ambitious targets by 2025, by 2030, or even by 2025 to decarbonize the economy. And if you look into the announcements that have been placed by Bloomberg or thought leaders from several OEMs or several global brands, they are just adapting the scheduling of their launches in terms of new cars, new vehicles, programs for investment, but they are not canceling them. And so after COVID, I still think that electric mobility will keep playing a role, a very robust role in the decarbonization plateau. And clearly, everybody of us here will have a role to play.
Oh, Duarte, thank you very much. This was a view around the whole world, but also slightly more positive. Now, let's see, continue on new views. I would now move to Jacob, if he's with us. Yeah, is it right? Jacob not with us, then we have Christian with us. Christian I have seen on the list. No, Christian also not with us. Okay, but Shivan we have. Shivan I see here. Yeah, okay, so then Shivan, please. What is your view on this? Also very positive or a little bit more mixed?
A little bit more mixed, actually. Let me first start off by introducing myself. Thank you, Axel. My name is Shivam. I represent an association called CHARIN. We are the charging standard for electric vehicles. So we are basically the standard by which the vehicles and the chargers talk to each other, connect to each other, and that way we make possible compatibility. Okay, so we're involved in a lot of discussions. I think with regards to COVID-19 and its impact, we are still a little early in the game. We're still not very sure how this will impact. I mean, I can see reasons for it to go both ways. On one side, you have oil prices crashing. You have government spending a lot of money, which means that there would be not enough, let's say, money left over for incentive programs. And those are critical for electric mobility to actually pick up and run. Okay. On the other side, you have people who are suddenly realizing how fast pollution is dropping. And we can expect something to come out of that also. So I'm still on the fence on both, on whether it will be positive or negative. But I think it will, to a large extent, depend on how long we have COVID as a huge problem with us. Whether we are talking weeks or months or years, I think the situation will keep changing depending on that scenario. That's my read on this situation.
Yeah, thank you. So that is what we see is a big challenge, and not only a big challenge as we have no clear outlook. Thank you, Vipul. Yeah, it will stay with us. Yeah, Shivan as well. It will be different. Duarte almost much more positive. What we do see when I look out of to the streets here, then we see it's totally deserted. There's nothing there. Now we see Germany comes back step by step. But also China comes back, even since about a week now, step by step, and even car demand picks up. But other people are more careful whether demand will pick up. And also I see mixed signals on the pollution. Immediately we saw the Chinese numbers that was dropping and having significant impact. But now we see, unfortunately, numbers from Germany that they are lower, but there are still peaks. And the peaks, also there are no cars, which is quite bizarre, no? That there are peaks without cars. So this means there are other sources. And then we have all heard the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who is now allowing and supporting the delay of the CO2 reduction target and the fuel consumption, which actually makes combustion engine much more affordable and compliant. And then at a negative oil price, it's almost for free to run your big truck. So all this, at times when there's no money, will be a big hurdle to our electric mobility, and especially to your charging efforts, no? Where at least two of you are pretty active here. Now, when we take that from the big view to your more individual view in your personal company, how do you plan now to run through this crisis that is in some areas coming to an end, in other areas still in between? And in certain areas, like in New York, it seems it's still going down. How do you personally, in your little company, in your world, try to come through this crisis and sustain the operability to be able to survive before it's too late? And I would again start with Vipul.
All right. Okay, Axel. So I think a very wise set of words, which was, I think, from a business point of view, never waste a good crisis. So I think we as a company are working and believing on these models. We have, I think, to an extent, very quickly adapted to what we see the industry as of now is performing. I think as a media, if I have to say, we've been tremendously affected in terms of our physical events, conferences, seminars, a lot of our publications which are being dispatched, printed. I think all of that has come to a complete stall. However, I think there are a lot of options which we are right now preparing. In fact, one of the recent surveys which we had conducted was to check with the entire EV community based out of India and Asia as to how many people post-COVID would like to be a part of live events or live seminars. And I think what we've realized is close to around 30% were ready to get back to its speed in the next 1 to 2 months, which I think was a pretty good indication that there is nothing that technology will not be in a position to replace the human intervention that we see in businesses. Moving on, I think in a lot of companies as of now, what we've realized is there have been some global bans on international markets, which I think would tremendously affect the EV industry. Uh, I think there's a heavy dependency. One of the recent news which I have seen is that Germany has put in a fine of 130 billion euros on China for coronavirus damages. I think if that is to be taken seriously, we are preparing for some deep problems within the industry, since most of the reliance for components and batteries is coming out of China. I think that is a major point for each one of us to be considering. I think as far as India is concerned, we have right now not even contributing to 0.5% of the global electric market share. So it's not something which we are currently affected by. But I think this is definitely creating a sense of personal commitment from various communities to drive electric vehicles, which is towards the larger cause, which is global warming. I also believe, I think we will see a massive push in terms of commercial vehicles picking up faster than passenger vehicles, especially because of corporate sustainability options or operational benefits or low maintenance cost, which I don't think is going to be the case for passenger vehicles. So all in all, I think I'd like to summarize by putting in that there are factors which definitely would be affecting, but I think India as a government is seeing higher subsidies which are provided by the government for increasing the vehicle infrastructure in our country.
Good. So very good, Vipul. Thank you also for this viewpoint now from India. Now we take again the global view. Seeing Duarte, how do you see your company managing through this crisis? And can you possibly balance out weak regions in lockdown with regions already opening up and therefore making a better cut out of it?
Sure.
Please.
Sure. In China, just as a very small positive sign, and as you were mentioning, Axel, the first days of lockdown opening, so the reopening of the country, marked another record visitor rate from consumers to EV concessionaires for EV cars. Okay, that was broadcasted even in BBC, in several means of communication internationally. So that's a good sign. But that's for China. Obviously, China has its own role within EV, within electric mobility, with a very, very specific scenario. If you then travel into Europe, okay, I think that we are now in two rhythms. You had the programs that were already in place to be done. So in the charging infrastructure side, in projects on bus side, on ultra low emission zones from the regulatory folks, you see also oil and gas companies that had investment plans. And what you start to see is, for instance, the regulation is being stalled and is being pushed back until the end of the year 2021. So the introduction of the ultra low congestion zones, ultra low emission zones in the UK, it's happening in Holland, it's happening in France, even in Lisbon, okay? But that will come. It will just come 6 months later. So we need to be patient, but that will come. So if the public powers around municipalities are thinking about this, and this is an European trend, you also see that the actors, the OEMs of our European OEMs, they are not canceling launches. They are possibly delaying them or calendarizing them, but they are to keep doing them. For instance, Ford is just announced the new charging network for the US and for Europe. For instance, BMW is now doing a charging program for the European operations, okay? And they keep launching. Fiat just launched its car, and it's having a good pre-order sales level. And if you also look into the independent OEMs, so Karma, Rivian, Lucid, all of them, even though they are delaying it a little bit until 2021, they keep their schedules of operation, their investment plans, and that's a good sign. From the point of view of the hardware companies, charging plans, charging infrastructure to their operators, you see NL keep pushing its investment plan into Southern Europe. You see new UK partners and operators launching new forecourts for electrical charging only in the UK. In Germany, you see Porsche just launched in Germany very, very recently a new super fast charging center without technology for FSX in that case, but very, very nice project. Also, you see in Eastern Europe good projects coming up in Hungary, in Greece. So I would say that actually in Europe, you see once the lockdown starts going down, you see an acceleration for the projects. We at FSEC, we are working through the roof on the quotation side, tendering side, getting all the multiple projects. Just last Friday, I got in my email box without even asking 5 new large projects to serve to the company, okay? Just in Europe. If you look into the US and Latin America, in USA, you see, I would say, mixed model. You see some programs in California and New York and Illinois and Florida keep going. You see some other utility companies, for instance, pushing back on their investment plans. Texas, Ohio, these two are good examples. But you still see in California good momentum for EV because lots of new players coming along, inclusively aerial mobility. So mobility for planes, for short haul planes. There are 2 companies there working there. One of them is Uber Elevate. Canada, same thing. Doing a good track record in terms of Trans-Canada Highway, Petro-Canada, Hydro-Quebec investing. So I would say that these 2 countries or these 2 regions are actually going very well. In Mexico, if people don't think, the first chargers are arriving by May. They launched the tender in March, or exactly in the middle of this crisis. So it's going. In Latin America, yes, it's going. We're having a slowdown in countries like Brazil, Colombia, and Chile, but still there are projects. So having said that, I think that once the COVID is tempered down, and it will not go away, immediately, because we will need to live with it at least until next year. That's what everybody is saying, considering the WHO. Still, there will be investment. Still, there will be opportunities. And one last word for India. India, and Vipul did not mention it, but EESL, the utility company from India, close to Delhi, is launching a huge plan, massive plan for charging for the next 10 years. The tender is now out. It's going to be closed by end of May, and it's going to be credited and tenderized by July. This means also that even a country that is still a little bit behind in terms of electric mobility, it will be a big player and has huge plans to invest on the EV cars. And that is something that is I'm very proud to see, because even countries with lowest conditions for EV, for e-mobility, are coming strong and want to bet on these technologies.
Walter, this is actually extremely encouraging. Yeah? When we see, and we have both been at the Bloomberg summits, and we see the Bloomberg cost regression that is coming, the solar growth on the solar supplies, as well as the cost that the solar energy is offering, and the decline in battery costs. Hopefully, China is, as you said, Vipul, is soon back and can supply us with batteries and wants to supply us with batteries. Then indeed we come to a cost competitive situation that might actually help through, because those who are locked into the ICE, the old players, those have been rich in the past, but now those get very poor because locked down, they cannot do anything. But the new players and the publicly funded, as you said, might actually be relatively independent. And we see now in all these countries in lockdown that the public funding and the state plays a much greater role. So let's hope that the states are actually staying committed to the plan.
So I'd like to make one point.
Yeah.
I think what's a very interesting point here is if you look at it from 2018 to 2019, we've seen approximately about 63% increase in the number of electric vehicle share, right? Out of which about 45% of that came from China. Now, if we were to compare the growth this year, I think we will not be seeing a massive growth. However, we will be evolving to see a much more mature market and lesser dependency on one of the biggest giant for electric vehicles.
That's right. That's right. Now, before we come to Shivam, yeah, that's fully correct. We see a much more diversified and more decentralized and also a more fragmented structure, which is good for a younger industry, because fragmented means several trials, several paths, and more elasticity, more smartness, more nimbleness. than having a few duopoly, multipoly, big structures that are all very rigid, almost like dinosaurs. Now, Shivam,
Yes.
coming to you. For how do you, in your context, see the survival through the crisis, and how is your outlook how to come back?
Yeah. So we are basically a non-profit association. We develop the standard. We don't do actually hardware. Okay. So we're actually taking the time to build the standard even better, so to speak, build more features into it. But to be honest, we're missing out on a lot of the face-to-face interactions that we do throughout the year with our clients, with our basically with our members who are building vehicles, who are building chargers, who are building components for chargers. So we're missing out on a lot of those interactions. It's nice to be on a call, but it's much better to do it face-to-face.
Yeah.
So we don't see an existential problem for Charin specifically. We are CCS, basically. We are the standard that is adopted in Europe, US, and a couple of other countries. Okay. But we see a lot of nuances in the Indian market. Stuart mentioned about the ESL tender, for instance. The ESL tender has quite a lot of complications, which would make it difficult for, say, foreign companies to bring it into India, for instance. Okay. We are seeing a lot of Indian OEMs come in with offerings, but we are yet to see them come in with a large number yet. I mean, it's going to come in, but it's probably going to be delayed a year or two, possibly. Okay. I'm still bullish on the market, but again, I'll have to go with the other panelists and say that it's probably going to happen a little later than we originally expected.
I like to add that as well. And I think it's probably reasonable, but 1 year is nothing compared to the 100-year history that we have behind us and the ambition of change, no?
True.
And Axel, just to, first of all, Shivam, we are a member of Charin, so Charin is a
very good. Okay, you know each other.
You don't need to sell me off on that one. No, but just to give you another trend that you see, it's very true, or two comments, very true what Vipul and Shivam is saying, because the fact that you cannot meet people and you cannot exchange ideas technically and you cannot showcase the factory or even visit sites or, you know, mingle together to develop the ecosystem, this is actually, you know, all the fact that we now, even today, the EVF 33 has been delayed, as you know.
Yes.
That is a problem. That is a problem because for the sector that is booming, it's important that people have some time to meet. And again, the number of webinars done is nice, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
But by the same token, that's the, let's say the downside of it. But for the same token, the upside of it is that you also see companies thinking about their strategies going forward and also launching new pilots, small ones, on things that there were not so much time up until now to test those models, being it in charging or even being it in the OEM side, because it's two flip sides of the coin. And so with that, I think that if the pilots emerge, you will see also some other startups coming up post-COVID with good platforms to then be scaled up with the help of the funds and the seeding funds. And the last point that I wanted to mention is that, and if you talk with some of the funders specialized in mobility, they keep wanting to see projects. The problem is that the number of projects that are interesting enough right now, it's difficult because of this lack of interaction. So the social distancing is something that is hindering the industry somehow. But to give, because I don't want to seem unconscious that the crisis is actually not hitting. It will hit strong. But if you look, for instance, into other variables of solar, for instance, you know, solar, the solar IPPs, large scale solar. This industry, and FSX is there as well, is actually meeting some issues because of the total cost of ownership of that project is much higher than one in EV, right? For a certain number of public chargers. That one is actually being delayed more versus electric mobility or versus pilots of storage or even versus pilots of biogas, which is areas that are always green, are all green, and where we as FSX are fortunate to be involved. So, but solar will actually have a rundown somehow. There will still be investments for already approved, but the elasticity of solar, it will have to be done in a much larger time frame comparing to EV. So to give some other a less optimistic note. Okay.
Okay, because I heard yesterday from a CEO of he was CEO of GM International, he was CEO of Volvo, and he's still in a supervisory board of large US and also global companies. And he was predicting we were swimming in electricity soon, like we did in oil yesterday, by the way. We were swimming in electricity thanks to the rise in solar. And I think when you and I were on the last Bloomberg summits, we saw the rise explosion of solars and the very low fees that are now paid, especially in Saudi Arabia and in the sunny Arabic belts. Feels to me like the electricity supply is not the problem. The problem is how to get electricity where it's needed, meaning where your charge spots are. And these are investments that take very long.
I think one point I'd like to add here is, since we're talking about solar, I think we
I think we lost a bit connection.
As a media, we have a dedicated wing,
which
operates pan-Asia level. I think
Excuse me.
VP, you need to repeat 10 seconds because we are missing 10 seconds. No?
Yeah.
So like I said, I think we have a dedicated wing as a media for the solar sector. We operate in Middle East, in Asia, in SAARC regions. I think since we mentioned about the solar industry, I think there's a very large distinction with the EV sector and the solar sector, primarily on the lines of, I think solar industry, you have the contractor, you have the consumer, you make a sale, it's done. When you talk about the EV industry, there are a lot of small businesses associated for the success of EV. For example, right from your auto part and repair industry, your real estate sector for setting up the charging infra, your mining industry for continuous supply of minerals such as lithium, cobalt. So I think the success for EV sector is going to be very different in terms of timelines, like we see in the other clean energy sectors, because a lot of small areas, and also you have a major lobbying who is driving, which is the auto industry, who will take a significant hit if the EV goes ahead. So I think it is in quite a complex state, and there are a lot of stakeholders, a lot of biases in the success of this, which needs to be overcome one by one by various stakeholders.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, when I see overall big optimism, that's actually very encouraging. I like this. Yeah, being here in Europe, involved by lots of pessimism from the old Europe, the old industry, and those laying off workers and short-term workers, and the money is not sufficient, and nobody can spend, and people are hesitant. I like your esprit, everybody, all three of you, and your positive view. Now, when we get it going in such a way, then we see that, of course, charging of motorbikes and of passenger cars is only one thing. The big thing gonna be now, and in cities is probably also manageable. But to really make an impact on decarbonization of transportation, we need to go beyond this. We need to have transportation that goes longer distances, whether it's now trucking or shipping or boat shipping or trains. And there we see that we are still very much depending on diesel. We are very much depending on polluting engines that are in some areas like big harbors actually being the major source of problem. I was, when I was recently in California, traveling to Los Angeles and to Long Beach, being the biggest harbor by combination. It's number 8, number 9, each of them. When I saw the number of 40,000 trucks being moved every day to put the containers from the boat to the whalehead, then I saw all the statistics of cancer, LA, premature death, respiratory diseases, and all these. And then I only see 10 Toyota hydrogen trucks coming. And 40,000 to 10, this is just like, yeah, it's not even a drop on a hot stone. It's nothing. But at the end, hydrogen could be a solution. Now, would this then be something that you would foresee as the big future, that is the next step coming? Or is hydrogen more a threat that is taking electricity away because the people say, oh, we just wait and keep diesel running and then we move straight into hydrogen. And therefore we would not get the expected environmental effect. Now I see who wants to take it first. Any one of you?
I can
go first, please.
I think it's going to be complementary. I mean, I don't believe in one-off situations. I think it will be complementary between hydrogen, between EV, or let's say electricity-powered vehicles, and even diesel. ICE will not go away just because we say it's going to go away. hydrogen will still has one issue. An issue is TCO. The total TCO to have it is still much higher versus ICE or even EV. Okay. However, the technology trend, the pace of innovation that is coming is actually pretty fast. So as is in the EV side. So I think it's going to be complementary. The only thing that I'm missing in terms of the hydrogen, let's say, is to have some kind of regulatory support, in the sense that to have the public authorities, can be the EU, can be the US, can be India, China, whomever, to get a framing on the energy mix to power the vehicles. Because in the end, electricity is the trend will be to keep being cheap. Hydrogen, once cheap, it's also going to be an alternative. And then ICE has the pollution issue. But from the carbon footprint, arena, we're going to be equalized between the two. So I'd say that I don't know the numbers, if it's going to be 40-40-20 or 20-50, whatever. It's going to be complementary. Hydrogen still depends on technology development, big time, only for the OEM and also for the charging side and the storage of it. But it will be complementary. And I don't believe in binary solutions, one or the other, and I don't think that will happen, quite frankly.
So meaning rather small batteries charging often than big batteries and charging rarely, yeah?
Exactly.
For your business,
and you will have multimodal points of access where you will have hydrogen with solar and eventually ICE as well. Today you see ICE with EV in a lot of petrol stations already across the world. And so the hydrogen will come in later on. In Germany, you already see that. Sometimes you have only in Hamburg, to take an example, some hydrogen-only stations, some EV-only stations, and then you have the three. So, I mean, quite frankly, I think it's going to become complementary because in the end, you also have the question of access. And that question of access is also very, very important. So I would say it's complementary.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Now, Shivam, what is your view? Hydrogen an opportunity, a threat, or something in between?
I would go largely with what Duarte says, in the sense that I also expect it to be complementary, but I'm not ruling out hybrids also, in the sense that, I mean, I expect the volume uptake to be different for different segments of vehicles. For a two-wheeler, you're possibly not going to see hydrogen ever come to that price point. Okay. On a passenger car, you might be able to do a not so expensive hydrogen car, but it might be cheaper to do an EV for the same range. Okay. Where I see hydrogen actually shining is possibly in terms of long distance trucking, or say long distance buses, heavy duty transportation, things like that, where your downtime is critical. You want to turn that vehicle around and send it on its next trip immediately. So in those cases, I see hydrogen really being helpful. In any case, they are complementary in the sense that a lot of the components are shared between a battery electric vehicle and a fuel cell vehicle when you come to the actual propulsion part of it. So one will gain from the other.
Yeah, it's both electric.
Yeah. So, but I'm not going to rule out diesel with hybrids also. I mean, those are possibly much faster to come onto the road than, say, hydrogen which requires infrastructure spending by companies other than auto manufacturers. Okay, so in that particular sense, for India, for instance, I think a hybrid would be a good fit compared to hydrogen, which would need someone to come in with infrastructure push.
And Axel, just to add into what Shiva is saying, with hydrogen, you have one topic which is extremely important: security. And security of your use, security of access. And that is something that I don't think is completely solved from the technology engineering standpoint.
Interesting point. I like this. Yesterday we talked even on hydrogen aircraft. People, what is your view on this one? Hydrogen is the bright future, or it's complementary?
Right. So I think it is a bright future and it is complementary. So it goes with that. But I think I would just build on what Shivam said, which is if you really look at the downtime for refueling of a commercial vehicle, I think a normal fast charger would look at about 30, 35, 40 minutes, I think one of the recent Tesla chargers. But when you talk about hydrogen, you're looking at max 5 to 10 minutes. So I think operationally, it definitely has some advantages. In terms of range, like Shivam said, I think the range pretty much is the same, but the price point differs of this. So I would have to go that it is in no way a threat to the EVs in any way whatsoever. Also, I think there is a major doubt across, I think, a lot of stakeholders, which is we have two options, especially a country like India or any other developing nation. You move from ICE to hybrid, or do you jump and you move from ICE directly to EVs? I think that's a question which is being debated a lot of times with opposing views. And if you ask me, I think there is no reason. I think India must move on to hybrid. Sorry, Shivam, I think that we must be looking in, especially when all the other nations have gone through the journey. A lot of learnings have taken place, and we directly evolved to EV because I think that's the way ahead. So hybrid, yes, it is easy for us to move, but it is wiser and smarter for us to move directly to full EVs.
And I mean, this is what Duarte and Shivam are supporting. Yeah, I mean, if you have a charge network that has a plug everywhere, then when I just look at my cell phone, when in old days my cell phone lasted a week when it was BlackBerry and even Nokia. Now it lasts basically a day. But I'm not as much scared than I was at the time because even if there's no combustion engine in there and no hydrogen, but I have a plug everywhere. And if I have a plug everywhere and I have a little battery in reserve, then I actually am calm. And I can rely on smaller battery life cycles and reduced autonomy. And I think a similar would be with charging. We don't need big batteries if we have charge everywhere, easily accessible. And then also battery can be smaller and we don't have so much charging times. Comes to the same point. So it all comes to that you are successful in putting a dense charge network in the world, which also would be better for stability, as I understand. Yeah, we have this vehicle to grid and grid to vehicle discussions. If you have a smaller battery, then this discussion is much less a problem than when you have huge consumers. Now, we do have another 10 minutes, I understand, from the briefing before we have a Q&A session. And Thomas needs to give me a sign if there's no Q&A. But if there's Q&A, then in order to prepare the Q&A session, I would have one more topic with you to discuss. And now let's think we are in year-end, wishful thinking. Some call it Christmas, some call it Diwali, some call it China New Year, but we are wishes. And now, what are your wishes to our policymakers, to our governments around the world, to the people in charge, to make sure that this positive spirit that you convey, that we see that we are not stuck by COVID-19. It's not the end of the world. On the contrary, it's the new future actually more positive because states can more control, public funding can push it forward. We do see less delay. We might have little delays, but overall it's still on track. And we will actually come to a decarbonized, to a positive future for our planet and for our environment. What is your wish now to the policymakers all over the world to make sure this is actually happening? And this in light of Mr. in Brazil, Bolsonaro, Donald Trump, who are now just taking some different directions. Please, now who wants to take it first?
Let me take this one, Axel.
Okay, Shivan, you start.
Before I answer your question, Axel, I just want to rebut one point of Vipul's in terms of hybrids. I am not suggesting hybrids for all vehicle segments, but I do think that, say, for long distance trucking, where in the absence of an EV solution, a hybrid would still save a little bit of fuel.
Fair point.
Okay. I'm not suggesting that we don't take our eyes away from EVs. I'm suggesting that EVs can come in many forms. That's all. Okay. When it comes to policies, for the Indian government, I would very simply say, focus on 2 points, fuel security, focus on air pollution, and let the engineers take the decisions. Let the bureaucrats take a backseat. That would be
That's very good. Let the engineers do it. I'm not sure everybody likes that engineers govern the world on this one, but not the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats. Duarte, what is your view all over the world? Active. You see all these different policies and decisions.
Yeah, I'd say that I say three things. One, and concerning a little bit the Eurozone, where we will never get to an agreement, it's very tough on anything. It's to get the harmonization of the legislation for the right to charge, for the interoperability of charging networks to be put in place, to be an example for other continents of the world to have it fully done, because that will just ease up the framework by which all the sector can work in Europe. The second is to have, you know, a very well thought of funding programs from the public state, from the public central office, not to pour too much money into the sector, but to pour the appropriate money into the right projects from the technology setting point of view, or from the more rural areas of our places, to get also that right of use for the electric mobility sector to get to more remote locations, because I think they require some funding, some special funding. And then third, I think that we should try to get more best practice sharing, in the sense that not to teach anyone, but to exchange info in a much easier way. And sometimes it's quite difficult, because the US think they do it in a way that it's better than Europe or even China, you know. And I do think that in this sector, nobody has all the right answers, and you can learn and leverage experience from one market to the other. And when you have a global view like mine, a very humble one still, you can learn even from countries like Chile or South Africa or even India, and bring good lessons for other countries at the same way, the other way around. Those would be my three wishes, and let's put it this way.
Very good. I like this a lot.
We don't need more money. We need the right money on the right projects.
I like this a lot. Thank you, Eduard. That's really a very smart comment, especially when you see innovative solutions. And innovative solutions sometimes come with the absence of money. Yeah? When you have to move, whether it's now the frugal Indian way, or whether it's now the C40 Zebra buses in Latin America, where you see the most aggressive BRT solution with electric buses are not in Europe or in US. No, they are in between Medellin and Santiago de Chile and in Sao Paulo. And that actually shows how we can do. And then eventually we get better solutions with much less money.
And Axel, one last point. It's good to have that, but after COVID, because now COVID has changed the mindset of a lot of business communities to cooperate easily, mildly, generously, without thinking of anything else rather than solving the health issue. Giving one small example, in Portugal, I've seen several companies just interacting between their engineering capabilities to produce a local sourced ventilator in 2 months, which has been done, involving FSEC as well, but other players in this industry. Still, I would love to see this done in a non-COVID phase, so that we solve some of the issues that are around here, like wireless. Everybody talks about wireless charging, but has anybody been able to do it in a way that actually is very good and very feasible? Not really. I doubt it. Just a question to leave people thinking.
Interesting question. People, your view on that one.
So I think primarily, as Indians, we're very good in documentation. I think our policies are absolutely fantastic. So I think one thing which I would really wish for is a complete implementation of the policy as it is. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is decentralized on manufacturing, which means we need to focus. I think the government has to focus on bringing manufacturing across various parts and globally, not just, and remove the dependency on one nations. So there is no major supply chain disruption happening. And I think one final point would be to, I think, interestingly, COVID has brought all businesses and removed all biases which exist, and everyone has a plain starting front right now from where they have to start. Everyone's taken a hit, everyone's on the back foot. I think right now, a positive emotion, maybe in the form of a stimulus package for companies, or in the form of really building on the sentiments which has been shattered. I think on these three fronts, I would wish the governments to work on, because I think the private companies are quite capable of coming back and being active once again. But what is required is a sentiment for the companies to reinvent and the support which is needed. The rest, I think, like Shivam said, bureaucrats are not required, but maybe a PPA would be working better for us.
And a productive framework. People, this opens up for an additional topic I would like to discuss in case there are no outside questions. Now I look for Thomas if there is anyone, and then managing, because I have not seen any questions yet. And if Thomas is not reacting,
I'm here.
Yeah, Thomas,
I'm
are
always
there
here.
questions from the audience, from the panels that we should tackle?
So do we have any questions? Maybe you were too much, explicit.
Yeah. So while the audience can send you questions, if you have one, it's good, and we put it right away. Otherwise, I will have another topic until the questions are collected, in case everybody wants to.
Please, from the audience, if people would like to give questions, yes, don't be shy.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you because tomorrow we have at 9 o'clock we have keynote of Tony Siba.
Yeah.
And he will also join our Earth Day party. Yes, so we'll make so also guys, we are invited for this because Tony Siba actually was one of the guys who helped us to build our vision. Yes, already in 2014 I brought him to I think first to Las Vegas and afterwards to Abu Dhabi, etc. Because even I wanted to explain to our leaders from the solar industry what is disruption. Yes, because you see, even our leaders were so pessimistic. Yes, finally. And when I invited him, people were thinking that I'm crazy. Yes, because Tony was so disruptive. Yes, and people from our industry said that his forecast is too crazy. Yes, and the funniest thing is that now, actually tomorrow, he will make update of the forecast. And it was 2-3 times too much pessimistic.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
and
impressive.
His forecast for the transportation actually is that by 2030, we will have around 30% of cars today. Yes, like in general. Yes.
Yeah.
So most of them, of course, will be 95% will be kilometer hours done by the self-driving cars. Yes, especially by the big floats. Yes, of the cars. And how do you think? You see how that will influence the e-mobility industry? Because actually it will be less cars, but then everything will be electric. Yes. So at the end of the day, it's great. Yes. What is your point of view? How do you see? Because we are the guys on the field.
I do have my view, but I will put this last. No, but of course we see, and we have discussed since quite some time, we have this peak ICE among us, no? And where we did not believe that with 98 million produced vehicles in 2017 and in 18, that we have seen this peak ICE. Today it's more obvious that it has been the peak. It's actually behind us, and now the future growth will, once it comes back from the end of 60s, lower 70s this year, it will be much higher EV percentages. And I think Duarte and I, we were in San Francisco at this summit when some of the panelists said, it's not about the number of, in this case, trucks and buses in your fleet. It's about the number of miles driven that count. And that's very important. For decarbonization, it's not the number of cars you show, they're all electric. It's about the number of miles you do electric rather than on diesel. And on this one, I think we see a tremendous change in the coming years, thanks to what we just discussed now. Cheaper infrastructure, cheaper battery, more solar, and policy, as we just heard, policy actions that are probably stronger thanks to COVID-19, with a bigger role of states and public authorities than it has been in the very recent past. Vipul, Duarte, Shivas, who wants to take?
Just two side notes for what you said. One is that fleets will evolve and will grow. It will be more important, not only vehicle fleets, but also bus fleets, but also last mile fleets. That clearly will be a growing market. That will then also change the way that commercial models towards the market. Pay per mile, pay per asset, leasing of fleets, etc., including the infrastructure. So that will happen. You start to see that happening pretty interestingly in several countries already. But it will take time. It will also take time to adopt that model, because people come from a way of either acquiring a car or a vehicle, or having a company car. So that will also evolve, and that will certainly accelerate. The fleet market will be important, and so the mobility as a service area will grow, but it will need also to be more robust, in the sense that the platforms by which you're doing it need to scale up faster to be able to serve the markets in a way that is common in the model, international, also covering several countries, and not only on a country by country level, or even on a city by city level. I think that is something that you still see a lot of need of consolidation on the mass side of the business.
And there's actually, when we're saying just what you said, when we see now what is happening, then we can also see, for instance, two trends we have not too much discussed now, but for instance, there's a North German company who makes retrofit of buses. Well, initially we thought this would not work. Now we see it does work when it is, like you said, it's an integrated contract, including the energy, including the supply. And with wind energy from North Sea, they can all over Europe, they have now a competitive solution of retrofit buses, which was impossible to just have the bus alone. And the other thing I've seen just yesterday when I talked to the CEO of Transdev, the big private operator of buses and trains, that in China, after COVID-19, the people trust more into public buses being a clean and disinfected way to move rather than in individual cars, so taxis, Ubers, the type of ride-hailing services. So meaning again, public has a credibility advantage, not only a financing, also credibility advantage to clean up the bus, so the people tend to move more on public buses than before.
Yeah, and just one last comment, Axel. Clearly, the fact that if a consumer will probably not think is investing in a car right now is not going to be the first priority. So he will try to extend the life of his vehicle. So if he just bought a diesel car, the booming of studios to change ICE into electric right now on those collection cars, ancient cars, or buses will probably even get another business line to retrofit cars that could be electric. We should also look into, because that's an industry that's going to also keep coming up, clearly.
Thank you. Now, Shivam, what is your view on charging? And in India, I have actually seen in India, you have also Ashok Leyland being electric buses and retrofit solutions jointly with Excite. What is your view on pushing this forward?
Actually, if the question is on retrofitment, then I see companies trying to do it. The issue in most cases is whether the original manufacturer is trying to do the retrofit kit or if it's a third party. Mm-hmm. Because if it's a third party, then it's a question of liability. A lot of small companies cannot offer liability for fleets. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when Ashok Leyland does a bus, whether they do it diesel or whether they take a diesel bus and do it as electric, as the original vehicle manufacturer, they would be in a position to extend their liability coverage to the electric vehicle. And that is something that I think is critical for fleets. I mean, you will not be able to run a fleet without someone giving you a liability coverage, either in terms of an insurance policy or in terms of a warranty or in terms of something else. I mean, I'm still not sure what it could be, but the fleets would need it before they take that vehicle. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I see retrofitment coming in, but very possibly what numbers we have seen in India for retrofitment, it doesn't make too much sense. Sometimes it's easier to go out and buy the newer electric vehicle because of tax policies, because essentially you're throwing out most of the value in the vehicle in the first place. Okay, so sometimes it's only a matter of another $2,000, $3,000 to actually get a small four-wheeler made new, so to speak. Okay, so retrofitment will exist, but I don't think it will scale up much in the Indian market. I mean, that's just my view on the Indian market.
Okay, interesting. Now, the question was not about just only retrofit. It was just one example on Thomas' question on how to accelerate this trend. going towards 2030. And of course, we have a lot of installed fleet. If we wait until we renew the installed fleet in 10% every year, then it takes ages. So this was one idea to be faster in getting there.
Revolutions sometimes take time.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm optimistic, but I'm not
that's
sure.
Good. We all need to be optimistic. Vipul, you're also optimistic.
Yes. So Axel, I believe primarily there is going to be a time when a lot of vehicle manufacturers will be unable to sustain without moving towards a complete, let's say not complete, but a major portion of the sales coming in from the shared mobility, which means they will be evolving with a very strong contractual agreement covering what Shivam said with the fleet operator. That's going to be one thing which we will be definitely seeing. Another thing I think we will also be looking at the government, the initial phases in a lot of countries running these fleets to build in more support for various communities and EV stakeholders. So government operated fleets will be operating quite often. I think in the short term, I do see shared mobility not picking off, considering social distancing because of COVID, which may be taking a bit of a short-term stall out. However, it may not last forever, but yes, that's something which we don't know how it's going to play out, at least for now. So those are my remarks on this.
In China, we see now in Shanghai, they're testing now ultraviolet disinfection overnight. And think about not only overnight, it's also like the washing street. When you wash your car, but you basically wash it inside. 99+% of disinfection. But if there's some lamp inside, then it's probably also possible during the day, at least during a break in 50 minutes, to have at least some type of cleanliness to solve this social distancing and the problem of touching and then getting some greasy type of infection.
Yeah, but I think that there's something which only China can do, no other nation can do.
Yeah, but you know, it's important because we just see the learning 10 minutes to go. Yeah, there's one more point because now we see all the motivation is high. We have our wishes to our governments. We see it will not be delayed. It's good for startups and for younger companies because they are more agile, more flexible, and more able to adapt, more frugal, when the Indian would say. No? And I think that is all fine. We see in emerging markets, it's actually developing better than in the rich old markets who tend to subsidize now the old industries. But then there's still one thing I would like to challenge all three of you. And that's what I see when I look out there in Paris. We had all these scooters. And they were all electric, they were startup, they were fancy, and they were great last mile innovation, and we believed in this. But I tell you, out there, and we had a parking spot, it was overcrowded 4 weeks ago. And today there's maybe one scooter left, if at all. It's all gone. And when I read the news, they're all dead. So somehow these smart, agile, flexible startup are also risk of trapped of cash. So what would be the right measure to make sure that we still get this innovation out of these startups surviving, even if the one in the other company might not survive, but we find a way to actually get the innovation coming that needs the creativity of these young companies, and they have them not all pass away because the cash is just not there and we have 4 weeks of lockdown on usage. Who will want to take it first? Vipul, you sit in front of me. Yeah, you start, okay.
So I think what is required from these startups primarily is a very sensible approach to business. I think a lot of startups right now are only started to finally focus on the end game or the Wall Street game, or finally to be acquired by one of the major giants. And there's very less conscious attempt or focus for these companies to build slowly.
Very interesting point. So basically you would recommend companies not to sell themselves off after 6 months or 2 years in a billion of einhorn, unicorn, but to make a sustainable model and to grow themselves. Absolutely. Interesting, very interesting point. I like this. No? Duarte, what is your view on how to make this death of the quick startups survive and still get the innovation coming?
Okay, I think that there will be startups that will face increasing difficulties right now to get access to funds, because there will be more competition. I mean, the number of startups that you see around electric mobility is very, very high. And so there will need to be some kind of consolidation or partnership with some larger companies. Some others, because of viability of product offering or even market placing, will probably, not going to make it. But, once this phase is over, there will also be other startups showing up. So I think that between the ones you lose, between the ones you gain, and between the ones that will need to partner, the leveling will happen. The question really is access to funds and the series and everything that was pre-COVID, that even though the capital, the private equities, the risk capital agencies will still want to invest, I think that it will take some time because there will be other business opportunities to do and to cater for. But we need to keep some kind of consolidation in this field, see what are the best routes for post-COVID, and unfortunately some others will not going to make it because for lack of funding. But if you look, for instance, into the OEMs and the number of OEM companies that are still launching, mainly based in India, China, Europe, and the US, new vehicles, even on the motorbikes, e-motorbikes, even in the early stages, they are actually being reinforced now in terms of number of investment dollars or investment euros or investment yuans that they can get for forthcoming series. I think that the issue is going to be in the beginning. Right in the beginning is going to be where the hurdle is going to be more painful, rather than more grow-ups that just need to scale up to keep the investment going once they have a platform over for a vehicle, a charger, a new grid solution, a new platform for IT into the industry, etc. And also, I think that the money is going to be more located into the industrial, to the physical production, rather than to the traditional mass transit applications, new apps for ride-hailing, bike sharing. We have a lot of those, right?
Yeah, too much.
It's more or less old news in terms of, let's say, new business model. It should become back a little bit to the industry side, new routes for investigation to develop the new ways. For instance, joining storage with charging, with solar, and eventually with modularity, that's going to be something important,
Interesting, yeah, Eduardo. I think it's a little bit the same as Vipul just said in other terms. You said it more technically.
Yeah.
You said it more technically, Vipul more economically, but it's about the same. Yeah, make more sustainable approaches rather than looking for the quick buck. Make sustainable approaches that really make technical, economical benefit rather than the quick money. Shivam, your view on how to make this flying in terms of how to make the startups not all pass away, but survive and get the renewal that the startups are supposed to bring coming.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is possibly a mix of what Vipul and Duarte said. But one thing is that basically COVID-19 was a black swan for anyone outside the health industry. I mean, we did not see this coming.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is not just a problem for the startups. It is a problem for the established companies also. So this particular scenario would affect all companies. Essentially, your business continuity plans have gone for a toss because this is something nobody even put in the business continuity plan. Okay. That said, any startup with a sustainable business model, something that is not reliant on venture capital funding, should normally survive. I understand this is an extreme scenario where you do not have any customers. I mean, the coffee shop doesn't have customers. Now that's unprecedented. Okay, your smart mobility solutions don't have customers. All that is, it's a very, very, it's a one-person solution. You know what they say, the once in a century kind of situation. Okay, you can plan for it, but when it hits you, you probably will not be prepared for it anyway. But in the general business course, if you are less reliant on venture capital funding and more on cash flow from customers, then your survival is possibly, your chance of survival is possibly a little better when something like this hits.
Thank you, Shivam. That was a very encouraging, also for my own startup, encouraging statement, because I do not get state subsidies here in France as I'm too young, but I tend to be surviving as well. We have about 3-4 minutes left, just enough for all of you to give a final statement. And maybe I start just with you, Shivam, your final statement, 1 minute only, please, that we can run all three.
Electric vehicles are going to come. There is no question on that. What will change, what is still up for debate is when electrification will come to different vehicle segments in different countries. Okay, you might find that two-wheelers in India are a better option for electrification compared to, say, cars in the US, possibly. I'm not going to get into that. All I'm saying is that electricity is inherently flexible. You can generate it from a lot of sources, and it is very efficient when it's transformed from chemical to physical work. Okay, so electrification is going to happen. The faster we accept that and move towards it, the better we are positioned to survive in the transportation sector.
Oh, very clear statement from Shivam. Electrification will come. That's a good one. I like this. Duarte, your final statement, 1 minute, please.
Yes, building on what Shiva said, yes, electric mobility is going to be around and will come.
No,
but the industry used to be able to educate the consumer, the concessionaire for buses, the municipality, all these actors that really, in the end, because electric mobility is all about location and opportunity to expand and explain why should you go electric and leave the ICE world that you lived in the past 50 years. That's one of the things that I think is important. The other thing that I wanted to say is, what is wave 2 electric mobility? And wave 2 of electric mobility will be integration with other variables of the energy mix, solar, storage, biogas, okay, and coupling all of this together to have a good system, completely carbon free, and to reduce in the end the carbon footprint that we have across the globe.
Oh, strong statement, integrating sector coupling, to make it a combined decarbonized effort. Now, Vipul, your last statement, 1 minute to go.
So I think primarily we would be looking at a complete integration of all the clean energy, that's for sure. But I think what this has also taught us is we will be looking at removing all our boundaries, political, economical boundaries across the globe. And I think right now what I look at is EV no longer remains a game of geographies, but also is now making us look at EV as a global shift, which all nations together would be moving because of COVID-19. And I think that's the way for us, is going to be global, like we've discussed in the Paris Agreement. This is going to be now the start for us to reach to a global change for the global warming. I think now this truly EV is a game of global warming.
Perfect. Thank you. So then I'm happy to thank you, all three of you, for your great statements. I think we covered a whole range of topics, from COVID-19, from the crisis, from technology, from where would it go, from our wishes to public regulators to not give up but use the opportunity, all the way to how to make startups. We had, thank you here, Vipul, saying be sustainable as startup, don't rely on just being bought by big companies, make sure you make it on yourself. We said Shivam, who said EV will come, it will come different by region, by segment, by area, but it will come. And we had Duarte from FASEC with a global view, integrate sector coupling, make sure we make jointly a decarbonized world. And I think this is what we all want to and what we strive for, make it decarbon, make ICE and combustion engine a thing of the past. Thank you, all three of you.
From my side, I would like to say, because in 2014 already, we said that we don't speak that it's a future. Solar, it's not a future. So that's why we named our vision Solar Future Today. And I think you should also name it e-mobility today. No, it's not the future, but it's today. And
It's
another
today.
thing, also I see that you are very nice guys. And in our industry, we said it's not B2B, not B2C, but it's H2H, human to human. And also I see guys that you are, the H2H players, and we'll be very happy to work together, also invite you to other events. And I hope not only just online, yes?
Yeah, also physical. Huh?
Exactly.
That's what we like here. Huh?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Axel, and great moderation. And thumbs up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. See you all soon again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.